Morning. I'd like to call the November 20th Community Services Committee meeting to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Seroy,
Present.
Ms. Weber,
Present.
Mr. Vickery,
Present.
Mr. Tholen, Ms. Polk,
Present.
Mr. Snipes,
He's coming.
Mr. Hildebrand, Ms. Evans,
Present.
Mr. Payton,
Present.
Ms. Peters,
Present.
Ms. Dunbar, Ms. Parker,
Present.
Mr. Fairfield, Ms. Haas.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Oh,
Mr. Lear.
Mr. Lear. Sorry, Mr. Lear. I have not received any public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. We will not approve September 18th or October 16th minutes because they're not prepared yet. So I'd like to call up County Clerk Dan Hendrickson. Could I get a motion to approve his monthly report, Mrs. Peters? Second by Mrs. Polk. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Good morning, Dan.
Morning, everybody. How we doing?
Good.
Oh, that was very, very quiet for you guys. Just wanted to talk a little bit about election recap. Wanted to start out with a thank you. Wanted to thank my staff. I have an exceptional, exemplary staff. They set the standard for election work in not only Kankakee County, obviously, but state of Illinois. And I'd hold them up against anybody. So when you drop down there, if you see them, if you would thank them, that would be greatly appreciated. I want to thank all of our election judges who toiled tirelessly through several hours of training. Carol, you could confirm that, several hours of training? Excellent training. Good. And a lot of hard work on election day. I want to thank some of our individual departments. I want to thank the maintenance department for making sure that when we had our extended hours that the heating was on. I want to thank administration for, when we needed to do training that they had rooms available for us. No questions asked, made sure that our schedules were cleared out. I want to thank you guys at the county board. For letting us, close to other services on election day. That was huge. Want to thank IT for always being available for us when we had any technological issues. Sheriff's office for providing us security at this building on election night. Want to thank the finance department for some yeoman-like work in getting the election judge checks out. Diana from the treasurer's office for making sure that those checks got cut. Marcia from the auditor's office for making sure all of that data is correct. Our checks for our election judges went out yesterday, which is darn near a record for us. So hopefully we'll get that money into the judges' hands before Thanksgiving. If not, then definitely on Black Friday. So, and want to thank all the voters who participated. We had 36,881 ballots cast as of the end of the day on November 6th. We're going to add a few more today when we certify. That was more than any midterm election that we've had. Percentage-wise, it was a little bit down, but our numbers of registered voters has increased. So one of the neat things that we've got with our poll pads is that you can see when people check in, and that's one of the graphs. I think everybody should have one of those. That shows how many people checked in during any given hour on election day. So you'll see, between 6 and 7 o'clock, we had a little bit over 2,500 people vote. And our peak time was during the 4 o'clock hour. We had almost 2,900 people vote during that hour. But in any minute from the time the polls opened at 6 o'clock that morning to the time the polls closed at 7 o'clock that night, there was somebody in Kankakee County voting, and that was kind of cool. So we had 7,605 early votes. which is 55% more than what we had 4 years ago. The day before the election, 810 people came into our office between 8:30 in the morning and 7 o'clock that night. That was more than any polling place in the county on election day, except for one. So that posed a little bit of a challenge for us because, you know, half of our office is out in the garage making sure that our supplies are distributed. You know, there's office staff that are, you know, conducting the regular business for the county clerk, so doing our passports, issuing our birth certificates and all that. And then we had everybody, you know, 810 people coming in to vote, so we had to make sure that those were taken care of. So staff did a phenomenal job on that. We had to replace one machine on election day. It was out in Witchert. Turned on in the morning, wouldn't take a ballot. That's not abnormal. So we replaced that machine. They were up and running by 6:30. So, you know, nobody was turned away from voting. They were able to put the ballots in the emergency bin. By the time I got out there with the machine, I think that they had a total of 12 ballots cast at that point. So, one of those things that, you know, would like to have a perfect score, but, you know, we know that we'll never get that. So, did anybody have any questions about election day?
Any questions?
Any?
Mrs. Weber.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that whenever there was a question to one of your staff members, they were there immediately. We had somebody come to Herscher 2 or 3 times, maybe on a circuit too, but it wasn't that we had a bad question. It just came to check and came to see. So that response really makes us feel comfortable with what we're doing too.
Good.
So,
Yeah, we do have coordinators that get areas of the county, so we send them out and they're, you know, going from polling place to polling place throughout the day, a few times throughout the day, just make sure everything's okay. So, so if we don't have anything else about election day, I would like to talk about our election judges. It's been over 10 years since we've had a bump in their pay. And in that 10 years, we've had a lot of changes legislatively. Same-day registration is one of those huge things that has significantly impacted our judges. Now, in addition to all of that other work, they have to register voters as well. I would like to ask for an increase in their pay. They're currently, a certified judge gets paid $145. I'd like to bump that to $160. For a normal election where we've got all of the judges working, that would be about $4,000 an election. I can make that work in my budget. One of the other things that I would like to do, we have the ability to, for anything except for the general elections, to schedule down to 3 judges in a precinct. If we can do that, I would like to pay those judges, since they're going to be doing a significantly more work. I'd like to bump their pay to $200 for working that day if there's 3 judges. But I'm going to need a motion from the board in order to make that happen.
Mr. Vickery? And Mrs. Polk with a second. Okay, discussion. All right, before we vote. Mrs. Weber first.
I just wondered about numbers. Can you give us some numbers of how many judges would be affected by how many judges?
Well, and for our next election could possibly be and probably be the primary election, which would be in the city of Kankakee and the village of Bradley primarily. It's historically a lower turnout percent. So that would be one of those elections where I would be looking to schedule to 3 judges. The April election, if there's some areas, and we do have some areas in the April election where there are not a lot of contested races. 4 years ago, I would believe that anything Grant Park through Mantino and parts of Moments had no contested races on the ballot, would be areas where I would look to schedule down to 3 judges. I can't give you a hard and fast number on that. I can tell you, like, the maximum, if we went to 160, that would be $15, at 300 judges.
That's why I was looking for
Yeah,
the 300
so about
judges.
$4,500 at a maximum for the election. On those where we're scheduling down, we're still saving money compared to the full complement of judges that would be making $800 for the 5. If we pay 3 at $200, it's $600. So it would save the county some money.
Well, interesting that you would propose this, because I was speaking at church to a man who had worked at Buckingham or whatever, Buckingham area, and that's what he said. I should get more because I was one of 3 instead of one of 5. So I'll have to let him know that you respond well. But that, you're saying it's a fair idea. What it is fair.
I believe so.
Yeah, it's fair.
Mr. Snipes?
How's it going? I'm trying to look at working the math because I'm looking at 145 to 160 is 15. Then if we add 15, that would have been at 175. But I guess we're justifying it because we would have 4. So if we split the fee of the one missing person, that if we downsize.
If we had, I would only pay the $200 if we were going to go to 3 judges.
That's what I was saying.
4 judges would still make the 100, and if this were to be approved, $160.
160, right? So my thing is, if we went down to 3, I was looking at how we're paying the other ones. It will be look like taking, if we downsize the 1, kind of splitting that among the 3 is almost what I'm seeing. You generally have 4, right?
No, we normally have 5.
You have 5?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I was looking at the number of 4 judges, but if you got 5, if you go down to 3, then I'm saying it doesn't really change your budget that much if you just reallocate it to compensate them for the 200. So you're not saying that there's no increase in your budget?
No. As a matter of fact, if we had 5 judges at $160, that would be $800. If we went to 3 judges, it would be $600.
Right. That's what I was saying.
It would save some money.
It would save. Okay. So basically going up to the 160, and you're saying you're able to deal to finagle this in your budget. Generally, I wouldn't
use the word finagle.
Well, kind of.
I can make this work in my budget.
You can make it work. And generally, I would have that individual to bring, so I would make sure that it will never have to be referred to finance, because we can make that decision here because we believe that it's internalized in your budget somewhere. So what I'm saying is, if that's the case, generally I would ask for, so I can see that, where it will be taken from, and that's a sure thing. But I trust you upon that. I do think that they need an increase into the pay. I would agree with you on that. And as the county is coming out of this budget thing, since you can work it in your budget, I'm going to trust that that's going to be the case. But I was trying to make the numbers work, and then now that you told me it was 5, and it looks like you can kind of reallocate your budget to make it work to me. So I'm for it.
Okay.
Mr. Payton?
My question is that if we vote for it today and it's approved, does it go into effect the next election or this election?
It would not go into effect. The checks are already cut for this election.
Okay, all right.
So.
Yeah, there's no raises after the fact, Sam.
Right. Did you want to be an election judge?
But I will comment, on the time an election judge has to dedicate for the day. Because my son was an election judge as a high school senior this year, and the alarm clock at our house went off at 3:30 a.m. and I don't think he was home till after 8 o'clock. So if you think about the time wise, it works out to, even on a three person, it's about $14 an hour. 2 person, it's closer to maybe less than that, roughly about 14.
And if you want to include the time that they spend in training,
yeah, that doesn't include training time.
Right.
So, it's generally a $14 an hour job. So if that helps the committee. Any other questions before we move the vote? Any questions? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Seroy?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes?
Let me be clear. We have included the 200 in this motion, correct? And the 160.
And the 160 for
Okay, aye.
Miss Evans? Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Miss Peters? Miss Parker? Miss Haas? Mr. Lear?
Mr. Lear doesn't vote on
Okay, I apologize.
so all in favor. Motion carries. Okay.
Well, that's all I had. I
Thank you.
wanted to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. So,
Hold on, Mr. Vickery.
Congratulations, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Dan, on a fine election. And there's no truth to the fact that Florida's trying to recruit you, and we're not gonna allow it anyway. So,
I don't
anyway-
know that I'm built for Florida. So
and we're glad. Thank you.
thank you.
Next on the docket is the assessor, Mr. Eric Blair. Could I have a motion to approve his monthly report? Mr. Snipes and Mr. Payton with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We'll let Eric get set up here real quick. Yeah, I gotta sign this.
Morning. This month and next month, I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of go through some year-end things that are going on in our department as we go to wrap up the 2018 assessment cycle. That's typically what happens this time of year. So I wanted to inform the committee that we have scheduled all of the final Board of Review hearings for the year. The last date of hearings are going to be on December 20th. And I believe the last scheduled hearing time is approximately 11:45. So we'll be finishing all of our final, final hearings on December 20th. We did have a total of, off the top of my head, I think it was 324 appeals that were filed for the year, and we'll get all of those hearings finished before the end of the year. So that's a good thing for us as we try to wrap up for the year and get everything over to the clerk as we have in the previous few years here. The things that are coming up right now, even as we speak, we're holding Board of Review hearings downstairs, and we'll continue to do that. Typically it's on Thursdays, but obviously with this week and Thanksgiving, we chose to have a Tuesday meeting. So we're holding some hearings today, and we'll be doing that every week until we get through December 20th. The idea is to have the Board of Review come in then probably the day after Christmas and sign all of the Board of Review documentation, the final abstract documentation, so that I can hand deliver a copy over to Mr. Hendrickson, the clerk, before the end of the year so that he can send it into the Department of Revenue. So we're on schedule, just like we were in 15, 16, and 17, to do the same thing and have that final abstract documentation to the clerk by the end of the year. The other thing that I need to do probably before the end of the year is hold the annual meeting with the township assessors, which if memory serves, I think we did that December 27th last year, and I'd look to do about the same thing again, probably Thursday the 27th. I'm going to start to work on that schedule here probably this afternoon. That's one of the final touches for the year before we kick off 2019 and get started for the 19 year. So those are the things that are going on in the department. I would open the floor to any questions. If there are any questions or comments, please.
Any questions for Mr. Blair? Mr. Vickery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, were the appeals about the same this year as last year, or is that a trend up, trend down?
It's a good question. Last year we had, and again, I apologize off the top of my head, I think it was 363 appeals we got last year. So, we did get slightly less this year at 324. That is a trend downward from, if you look back to, 2016, 15, 14, and before, because, and we can speculate as to why, but I know that when the market was going down, obviously folks thought that their values should drop faster than they necessarily were. Some of that has to do with the fact that it's a 3-year average, and you can't catch up to the current day's market quite as easily as some would like us probably to when the market is going down. But so that did create a big number of appeals back in 2011, 12, 13. But now that the market is stabilized, I think that's probably the indication as to why we're seeing fewer appeals at this point. I'd also point, if I could take a moment, I'd also point out the fact that I think the assessors do a pretty good job of maintaining some equity with their assessments, which really helps to negate that part of the argument. And then it comes down to really just whether or not you think the market value is correct. Any other questions?
Mrs. Weber.
You had spoken with me about you send, after a person appeals, you
Sure.
send an answer back, and they can then appear at a hearing if they don't agree with it. I wonder what that percentage is. How many who get a letter that says this is what we've decided, says fine, and then they wouldn't be the 324. Those are the ones that.
Well, yeah, I'm going to take a guess, and this is absolutely just off the top of my head guess. While we have 324 total appeals, we'll probably hold less than 100 hearings. So probably 2/3 of the people who file appeals or more are satisfied with that first review when the township assessor gives their evidence to the Board of Review, and the Board of Review looks at both the assessor's side and the appellant side. Typically, a lot of those things are resolved beforehand, but we do have a fair amount of hearings to hold, and I like I said, this is without counting anything. It's probably maybe 1/3 that show up to the hearings, the final hearings.
Thank you.
Mr. Vickery?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. There were some issues out in Pembroke. Did that smooth out quite a bit, Eric? Or
Which issues do you?
well, there was issues of disparity and a big spread in value between some pieces of property and other pieces of property, and it kind of surfaced a year or two ago, and I haven't heard much about it, and it was just something that does come up in conversations in the coffee shop and stuff. So I thought I'd ask that question.
That topic does come up from time to time. I know that with the assessor stepping down and a new one being appointed, she looked at some things and made some adjustments. We didn't get any equity complaints this year from, well, I shouldn't say that. There might have been 2 or 3, but it was a very small amount of appeals that were filed, which gives me an indication that maybe there isn't so much unrest in that regard. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Blair? Seeing none, Eric, you have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Take care.
Next up, Animal Control, Miss Julie Boudreau. I need a motion to approve her monthly report. Mrs. Evans, second. Mrs. Polk. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
If it was a little warmer, I'd be a lot better.
Amen.
This is too early for this.
That is very true. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you.
Are there any questions that I can answer on my report? You can see that the revenue is up quite a bit for the year end compared to last year. And that again reflects on the increases in fees and registration that happened starting at the beginning of the year. Happy to report that our bites seem to be down a little bit for the total from last year. The number of animals, that always fluctuates. We're a little bit high right now, but we anticipate that will decrease and slow down as the winter marches on. And I don't have a whole lot to report. We've been really pretty busy and anxious to get back to our AWAC meeting this month. We missed one last month, correct? And so I think we've got, some topics to bring into the new year and some work to be done. We're happy about that. We've got a couple, our fundraising group have a couple little events coming up. Actually, Rich's Tap in Moments. Stacy Thompson is our newest officer, and I think her family manages or part owner or something of that establishment, and they wanted to do a little fundraiser for us. So on December 8th, if you don't have any plans, you can certainly stop in. They're have rented the Legion next door. They're having food, raffles, Santa, one of the best Santas around, will be there. They're called this little event Santa for the Paws. And then later in the evening at Rich's, they have several comedians coming in. And I mean, that's something we will do again for our 3rd annual comedy night, March 30th. So, sometimes I look at it and I think, our job can be full of stress, and laughter certainly eases stress. So come out and join us and have a little fun and support a good cause.
What time does Mr. Legesse perform?
He should be on there.
Mr. Snipes.
Quick question. I see that in the village revenue that is down. Is it because they have less calls than they did in the prior year?
I would have to look at them specifically on the calls. Sometimes it can be a matter of what those calls are. If they're more during routine hours as opposed to after hours, there's a difference in cost on that. We're down some, but not significantly. I don't want to put my cart before the horse by any means, but I did get a request from the village of Shabance with an interest in a contract in partnering. There is a little bit of a hurdle there because they're a split village. Part is
In
Kankakee
Iroquois County,
part
yeah.
is Iroquois. They asked if we would be able to cover their entire village. I said that would be something that I would have to take to the board. They did indicate that the sheriff covers their entire village, the Kankakee County Sheriff. I said, well, that's good to know. So they had their meeting last night. I sent them the letter that I had sent to Buckingham with the options of a good, better, best service, and we'll see what they respond with. I haven't heard yet, but that was just last night. So,
Good news.
yeah.
Good news. Any other questions, Mrs. Weber?
Thank you. I wondered if there'd been a fairgrounds meeting lately, or they
Swap meet?
Swap meet. Well, the last one was October, so now things will be quiet as far as hosting until April.
Oh, it will.
I think there's still some conversations to be had. I don't know on a state level if any language will be introduced to amend or improve there's a small paragraph that is a directive towards swap meets and what they're supposed to do. It does say that the organizers of the event or the organization is supposed to maintain records for a year. It doesn't really indicate that they're supposed to turn them in. It just says maintain them. The organization had told me that as well, that they're supposed to hold on to them and then if asked. I did put a FOIA request into the Department of Ag and asked for those records. I did indicate that I knew they probably didn't have them. It was a previous conversation that I had with the head veterinarian, and so I indicated I realize you may have to request these. I did get a response back that simply said they had nothing. So that was a little disappointing, but I'm sure there will be more conversations, and you know, it's my hopes that there will be improvement and changes before the April meets. We're to start up again.
Any other questions for Mrs. Woodrow? Seeing none, Julie, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Next up, recorder, the SCAD boys. I need a motion to approve her monthly report. Mrs. Peters, seconded by Mr. Payton. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. She's passing out some additional information, it appears. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning. How's everybody?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Well, this is your surplus.
Yeah, we're
equipment.
gonna see if this will work.
I thought maybe you were trying to get rid of some of that contaminated microfiche.
I would
film
love
or
to, but
whatever.
unfortunately, we still need that information. So, do I plugged it in, so.
Let's see what's going on.
Let's see. Technology is my friend today. Nope, that's not what I want.
Don't pay attention to the man in the back.
Jason's my helper here.
Yes,
That.
because it's worth something. So we'll have to declare something.
And surplus. Perfect. So for discussion today, I have two pieces of equipment in my office. They might look familiar to some of you. Those are microfilm scanners. I have no idea how old they are. I could tell you when I was in grammar school, I think I worked on something very similar. Hey Jason, do I just hit arrow down? Arrow down to, oh, that one? Okay. So the
Thanks,
very
Jason.
first, thank you. So the very first one you're looking at is the Canon 300. I did some looking on eBay. The parts really are more probably valuable than the machine contained itself. It's about $200.
Is it in working order?
Well, yes.
Okay.
And
For the committee's sake, it is in working order.
yeah, it turns on. You can put film in. The resolution on the screen, though, is really difficult to see what you're looking for on the film, on the fiche cards.
Okay.
But yeah, they turn on.
Okay. All right.
So, and then the second machine we have, you see, is the Canon 800. Same scenario. I have no idea how old they are. So as you know, I've been here and I'm 10 years old now. So, give it another 10 maybe? Maybe? I stopped paying for the maintenance agreement on these about almost 5 years ago because I think I was paying more than I could have paid for a brand new machine. So, I'm showing you the two brand new machines we actually purchased. One in 2014 and one in 2016. You could see there's a great difference between the overall mechanism of the machine. It's smaller, it runs off a CPU, it images onto a regular monitor. It's a 27-inch monitor. It's really nice and clear. If you've ever been in my office and had a look at film, especially some of the older film, reading the handwritten documents or whatever, the technology of these two machines is phenomenal. I have people who will wait to use this before they'll turn on those old ones, if it ever got to that point. Sometimes we have to ask people, if you're just you know, looking at images and writing information down. Can you please let the person get their image and move on? So, but truly this new technology that we've invested in has been a great asset to not only the office, but to the customers who use the office. Images that are produced off of these machines are general fund revenue opportunities. So every time an image is made, it's 50 cents a page that goes into the general fund. So what I'm asking is I want to start cleaning up my office a little bit. I'm not big on keeping stuff and piling it up and just letting it collect dust. So I'd like to declare it surplus and see.
Are you gonna try to put it on eBay yourself, or are we gonna just auction it like we do all our other?
Well,
surplus
because
stuff?
of value, and I was reading the how that works.
Okay.
The value isn't over $500, so to go out for bid and do all of that. I have one title company that has expressed interest in one of the machines. I was going to let the other title companies know. I didn't know title companies actually had their own machines in their offices. So that's great.
Okay.
I have asked around to my other peers in the recorders in the state. None of them are interested in this. They're all moving towards the new technology because they know the value and importance. I know Kankakee Library does have these same similar machines, so I'd be happy to reach out and talk with Betty.
Okay.
And see what her needs are. But I'm ready to just move on.
All right.
And so I'm asking.
So we need a motion, Mr. Snipes and Mrs. Peters. Do we need a roll call vote, or because we're declaring a surplus and she's going to get money from it, or do we need just a voice vote? Voice vote? Okay. All in favor of declaring these two machines surplus and she can get whatever she can get out of them? Say aye. All opposed? Same sign.
Very good. Any
Thank you.
other
Motion
questions on what's going on in the office or concerns?
Any other questions for Mrs. Gadboy? Anyone?
Very good. So what do I do here? Jason, what do I do? That's great. He just shows up.
I know, it's awesome.
I need this in my office every day so I can just call him and say, Jason, read my mind. He's phenomenal, let me tell you. He fixes and repairs everything for us when we push the wrong key. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great Thanksgiving if there's nothing else.
Have a good day.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I think we're gonna get an update from the AWAC Committee, Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, Mrs. Parker. Could I have an update?
Yes, we are meeting next Wednesday at 3 o'clock, second floor conference room. We will have 3 new committee members joining us, so we're going to spend some time going over our scope of work and what we have going on. So they're coming in. They need to be acclimated to who we are and what we're doing. So
And what you've done in the
what we've
past.
done in the past,
Right.
and then I'll be working with Julie. We're going to be drafting a statement to send out about the services that animal control provides. There's still some confusion. Still working on those contracts between the villages and municipalities with animal control and them to help them and help us as well. So we have a lot of outreach and public relations projects going on as well.
Is there any questions for Mrs. Parker about the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, or any comments from this committee? Seeing none, thank you, Tinker, for all your hard work for that.
Thank the committee. They're great.
Is there any old business to come before this committee? Any old business? Any old business? Any new business to come before this committee? Any new business? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion, since it's normally in the back row. I will go Mrs. Evans, It's her last meeting. Yes, it is her last meeting. And Mr. Snipes with a second. All in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.